Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Yeah, George, I didn't move my decimal place quite right when I was looking at that $0.002 billion. My calculator doesn't go up that high.
Yeah, it's great news, though,
Yeah.
if they get it through. So I have more curiosity about people's homes than I ever had.
I was just complimenting Beth on her roof.
It's a nice looking roof, Beth. Ceiling.
Ski lodge.
Peter, you got some interesting stuff on that shelf.
Here's my guitars.
Oh, that's a lot of guitars.
Yeah, I collect them. I don't know why I can't play them like you do.
Who takes care of the plants in your place, George?
It's a shared labor of love between my wife and I. If you ask her, it's that she does it, but you know. Okay, so I think we're probably best served by holding off for just a moment, letting Randy join us. I'm gonna go ahead and send him a reminder.
Hey, Sean, are you going to be at your office tomorrow?
I will.
I might swing through there and get you to sign your oath of office. So I got him back from the courts and I need you to sign it.
Okay. Happy to do that.
I'll call you ahead of time.
I'll be here.
Okay.
Just heard Grand County's going to red.
Oh, gosh.
And magically coincidental, their 5-star program's getting stood up at about the exact same time.
That'll be an interesting case study. I think a question in my head has been whether they will whether they make you hit some metrics, like be in red, be totally at 0, hit some metrics, and then get your program operational. So I'll be watching closely. I don't know if that made any sense. It's late in the day.
Yeah, I was hearing that there's so many people infected at the resort that they may not be able to run all the lifts or even shut the resort down. And that's, you know, not the official word, but I heard that today.
Oh, I see Craig's question got answered. Who's going to red? Grand County.
I heard that information as well, Sean.
George or Beth, or either one of you texting Randy?
Texted him. I'm calling him now.
Okay, thank you.
Not getting a response. Maybe we hold off for just a little bit more. I don't think it would be a big deal for us to get started, given that I don't think there's any decisions on the table today. Happy to hear your feedback on that.
You have a quorum, so you're fine to do it from a legal standpoint.
I think we wanted to do an executive session as well, so I would assume we want Randy for that.
George, are you around tomorrow too if I swing by for a signature? I'll call you before I come.
Yeah, I'll be around. I can also come to Georgetown if that makes it.
I'm headed east, so I can swing by.
Is that an oath of office?
No, it's water agreement that has to be notarized, so I can't sign it for you.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna, Sean, unless you object, I'm gonna just go ahead and get us started here.
That's fine with me.
Okay. Just to kick things off, people watching are probably aware. If not, you're being notified now. The state moved us into yellow as of 6 a.m. this morning. This meeting was originally scheduled for us to go through the data and arrive at our own opinion about where we think we should be so that we can communicate with the state, CDPHE. Given that already has happened, what we thought would be a good use of this time, since we had it scheduled, was to review the data, build some context around the decision, talk a bit about what this means and doesn't mean about, safety in the community and recommended actions by people in our community. So with that said, Tim, I think that the floor is yours to run us through the latest on our COVID data.
All right, thank you. Hello, everyone. So as George stated, the state CDPHE sent a letter late yesterday indicating that we would be moving to level yellow as of 6 a.m. this morning, which we have done. Last week, as we indicated before, we had 19 individuals tested at the community site here. We had an additional 38 tested this Tuesday. So a little bit, almost a doubling of the numbers from previous week. That information in terms of the test results are starting to trickle in today from that. We haven't gotten all those back yet, but still coming in. So right now, our two-week cumulative incident rate is at 102.67 per 100,000, with the test positivity rate just below 3%. And then the 1 week cumulative incident rate puts us at level blue at 51 per 100,000, with the test positivity rate actually a little higher, 366. Those numbers are going to change here in the next day or two, up or down a little bit, based on those results from those 38 folks who were tested on Tuesday. So not quite there yet. As most of you know, the suggestion from CDPHE around the COVID dial, what they're calling 2.0, was to look at 1 week incident levels and test positivity as opposed to the 2. And then based on that information and the results over the last week and a half, almost 2 weeks, puts us in the level much lower than where we are previously at orange level. At which point the CDPHE decided to move us to level yellow. Someone had asked, why don't we move down further than that? CDPHE is not moving any county any more than 1 level at a time, up or down. Unless there's a massive spike in numbers in the wrong direction, I couldn't see them doing that for more than 1 level at a time. So we were in orange previously. We are now officially in yellow, which puts us at 50% occupancy with an increase in the maximum numbers. Has a whole host of ramifications for different types of businesses. That information is available on CDPHE website in regards to the specifics around your business type. So I would reference that. So that's sort of it in a nutshell right now. Even though, and this is my professional opinion, because this is why I get paid to do what I'm doing. It's my professional opinion that we should not use single week data to move us in one direction or another. 1 week, a trend does not make, in my opinion, particularly when we have low test numbers like we do. So given the dial 2.0, if our numbers continue to decline, based on CDPHE's guidance, they could potentially move us down another level in a week or 10 days, whatever that time frame is. It would be my professional opinion that we wait 2 weeks for that to happen to move us down to level blue. And to be quite honest, really, there's only 1, 2, maybe 4 businesses that would directly benefit in a significant way from a decrease from level yellow to level blue. Really, all it does is increase the maximum capacity for those the largest of the restaurants in the county. It doesn't really change it for most other businesses in a significant way. So that's the state of affairs right now. That's where we're at. And are there any questions?
I think that sounds pretty reasonable. I guess my only thought is if the numbers look insanely good, waiting another week, I don't know, I might feel a little bit different about that.
Well, I think, and I'm sure everyone's familiar with this term, but opening too soon or too much too quickly would be that case. Right now, the estimate from CDPHE and the state epidemiologist is that 1 in every 149 Coloradans is actively infected. If you go to level blue, you're now almost assured that somebody in your restaurant of 150 plus patrons is COVID positive. And if everyone in the restaurant has their masks off who is eating, the potential significantly, exponentially increases right there. So there's sort of that threshold in terms of the potential for exposure when you get to that level. That's my logical rationale for that. I mean, if the number, if the estimate out of CDPHE goes up to 1 in 300, 400 Coloradans is actively infected, then it makes a little sense to maybe go up from there. But when it's 1 in 149, which is our current estimate and has been actually for the last several weeks, you're starting to push the limits of probability when you now have 200 people plus the 70 folks who work in any one restaurant that size. And the potential is there.
Yeah, like I said, that sounds reasonable. I mean, the thing that just sounds a little wonky to me is making that declaration now when we don't even know what the data is going to be in the future. And the thing that I imagine the state had some rationale for shortening the 2 week to the 1 week. I'll just leave it at that.
Their rationale, so far as I understand it, is because particularly when folks were up at the north end of the orange level and into red, when you made it 2 weeks, it made it very difficult for some counties to get out of that red, out of that color and into the next color, is why they truncated it to that's the rationale that I heard directly from CDPHE. So it's not a declaration at this point. It's my professional guidance as to why I think we should look at a 2 week window instead of a 1 week window. If we're only testing 20 to 40 people in a week, is that really a sample size that we are willing to work with? And the majority of people who it would benefit, they're serving a clientele who isn't from Clear Creek County. They're from outside the county, and the potential is this grows from there. So
Fair enough.
Randy, I saw you had unmuted.
No, only to apologize for being late. And I'll be frank, I'll be honest, my sister called and it totally surprised me about 15 minutes before the meeting. And that's, one of those things. She lives across the country and her daughter's had COVID twice. And, so when your family calls during this, you kind of tend to answer. And I just lost track of time talking to her because we hadn't talked in a long time. So sorry.
No worries. I don't think you missed much. We only started a couple minutes before you got here. It was just, I think, the latest on the number of cases we've had. And I know you track that data really close.
I know that we had gotten 38 tests done. I did not know, I haven't checked to see what the results of those tests were.
They're starting to trickle in. We do have some positives from those 38, but we haven't received all of them yet. So
Okay. All right. I saw a little jump of, I think I looked at the state site and it looked like something had jumped on the state site by a couple of positive.
yeah, our numbers actually went down and then they went they went up. They went down because they had counted a couple of suspect cases that they subsequently went back and determined that they weren't in fact cases. So our number went from like 351 down to 349, and then they may have jumped back up as these cases or these tests are coming in. And one thing I've told, particularly the Idaho Springs restaurant community is, regardless of where we are on the dial, as a restaurant owner, you should only open up as much as you feel safely you can do so in keeping your employees and the patrons safe. If you can't open up to 50%, then open up to 40%. There's nothing requiring you other than the economics driving that to open up to that level, and only open up to the level that you think you can safely do that and protecting your employees and the patrons in your establishment.
So my own opinion regarding what you were talking about, 1 week or 2 weeks worth of data to move to blue. I tend to agree with you. I also just accept your professional advice on that. I think what makes a lot of sense as we move to blue, that's a pretty big change in staffing. There's a reasonable amount of runway, I think, required for a business to really be able to take advantage of that. So I would like to suggest that we all have it in our mind that we're going to give some clarity on Tuesday about, what kind of metrics would get us into blue and when. Not saying that I don't think we would have the data to decide on Tuesday anyway. We wouldn't even eclipse a full week. But I think if we were to do something like that so that people have the tools to look at the data themselves and get a good feel for where we might be heading, I think that's a good way to give the kind of certainty to our business community they've been asking for. Randy?
Yeah, and I can continue to provide that state estimate of the number of Coloradans who's actively infected, because I mean that number really drives more for me than how many cases we have in Clear Creek County in any given week, right? If 1 in 150 Coloradans is actively infected, that number is more significant than if we had 4 cases in Clear Creek County registered in the last week. So I'll continue to provide that number from the state response or report.
And my take on it is somewhere in the same area. I mean, I don't know if talking about something hypothetical brings certainty to businesses anyway. We could talk about what kind of metrics might do what, but at the current time when we're talking about a 2-week wait before a change again anyway, I mean, it's more information like it was the last time we met, but I don't, since we're not actually making a decision on that day, since we wouldn't have the data to make the decision on that day, it's and I mean, no, not casting aspersions on what you said, George. I'm just not sure how much certainty it brings them for planning purposes anyway, but I'm happy to discuss it. It's not that, so.
Yeah, certainty might not have been the best term there. Kind of similar to how we did it this Tuesday, where we said, it looks really likely. And, that's all. So.
Well, I think a really main thing that happened was that we held that extra meeting and it didn't really change anything. But the thing I noted was that there was a great deal of appreciation that we held the meeting to be able to get more validation of what was going on and people at least hearing something and hearing that we're looking at it and hearing numbers again and getting updates. So I'm fine with it.
Yeah, and I thought the timing was great for that Monday meeting. I know that there's 2 big food vendors and they both have Monday morning or Monday afternoon food order deadlines. So.
When did we send the letter to the state that Jill responded to yesterday?
I sent them a letter on Tuesday after that Monday meeting.
Right. So my observation is the meeting was pretty important because it led to the sending of the letter. And I believe the sending of the letter led to our yellow status this morning.
That could be.
Yeah, so a question in my mind, not related to the conversation we were just having. I note our average 1 week average positivity did go up by 50%, which is easy to do when it was as low as it was, right? And our sample size was as low as it was. Tim, I'm curious, what does that, obviously, I'm not asking you to the extent that you can know this, is that a harbinger of bad news as we get more testing volume?
No, I mean, if you test none, your test positivity rate, it was regression to the mean, right? It goes towards zero quickly, particularly when you have 3 weeks of that. So I think we're going to plateau at some point if we have a stable sample size of, let's say, I mean, prior to this, for November, December, we were averaging roughly 60 tests or more, 60 to 100 on any given week. And so when we went down to basically none for 2.5, 3 weeks, and now we went 20 to 38, we're going to plateau at some point, and that's going to give us a true sense of what our test positivity is. I mean, we, for better part of almost 3 months, we're at roughly 10% was our test positivity rate. So I think this Tuesday will give us a little bit better sense of what it actually is. And then maybe next week, if we have 40 to 60 people sampled, it'll give us much better samples. It initially went up, but it might plateau at some point or go down slightly to what it really is.
Okay, thank you.
I think to state George's question a little differently, if the volume of testing continues to go up, as people become more and more aware that it's available, and the positivity rate continues to rise, that's not necessarily good news.
No, it's not good news, but it's, I mean, we're certainly well below the threshold right now for the threshold's 5%. And our 2 weeks at 2.9 and our 3 weeks at, or 1 week's at 3.6. So I imagine we're going to stay below, just given what I know around us and more broadly in the state. We're going to stay below that 5% is my guess.
Good, thanks.
And maybe I don't understand that number, but does that mean if you have 20 people come in who get tested and one person is positive, you have a 5% test positivity?
Correct.
So with testing the numbers that we're testing now, that's an extremely noisy measure that's going to jump all over the place unless we boost our testing to a lot higher number.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. It's based on the number of people. Well, in all fairness, it's not just based on the community test. To George's point, I think on Monday, it isn't just related to the community testing that we're doing.
Yeah, it's
here.
all the testing for residents.
Right. So it's more than 38 for this week, just as an example.
Yeah, even though we have small numbers, so our number is not going to be as meaningful as Jeff Goes or Denver's or somebody who has hundreds or thousands of people being tested.
Correct.
So that's the reason why therefore Tim is looking at the state numbers to be as meaningful as our local numbers and trying to make good determinations. And I guess that's the reason, because that number, as Sean said, was so noisy. We had such a low volume of testing that it was that we had no data that meant anything for a while.
The state numbers are kind of, in a way, not perfectly meaningful either, because if you are a college kid in Illinois and you test positive, but your address where you're registered to vote is in Clear Creek, we're going to eat that number, right?
Yeah, the case will be attributed to us, but we can circle back with the state and say that kid doesn't even live here. He was tested in Illinois. He lives in Illinois. Yes, his home of residence is Clear Creek County, but he doesn't live here. We've had several cases over the last many months that was the case, where we circled back with CDPHE and said that's not our case.
Yeah, fair enough. That sounds good.
But those are few and far between relative to the total number. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, this is a challenge for most smaller counties, and we're certainly not the smallest county. I mean, there's counties with 500 people in it. So a single test with a single positive can set them off. And this has been an argument of smaller counties to CDPHE that we need to have a little bit more sensitivity to the smaller counties, because 2 tests in 2 cases can really mess with our numbers, and it doesn't really reflect a significant increase in risk. It's just, when you get to small numbers, it's difficult to make sense of them. And that was part of their rationale behind 2.0 as well. Some of the trying to tweak some of the metrics they use and how they look at them. I don't think it's perfect, but it's certainly better than 1.0, and perhaps 3.0 is, I don't know, 3 times is better. I don't know.
So something that's on my mind, and I don't know if this is probably not a question, more a statement. I know in the past we've talked about the behavioral effects on just individual decision makers as we move around on the dial. And there's been some speculation that being in red is like more persuasive, helps people remember that, you know, we should be socially distancing and wearing masks and all of that stuff. And I have some concern that being in green, potentially moving to blue, will cause our folks to feel like they can be a little less careful than they were yesterday. And then adding to that is we have some information from the last couple heat maps we saw that show pretty clearly that the density of cases is in areas that don't interact very much with our commercial base. And so I guess maybe, I don't think this is a question. I think this is a statement. I guess I would like to encourage, and I hope you all agree, just encourage our folks to, you know, continue to act like we're in red as far as their own decisions. And, you know, we all know that the death rates on this are low, and that for a lot of people, and that it's hard to isolate and all of that stuff. But we also, I hope everybody understands, and I'm sure the vast majority of people do, that, you know, if you go have some fun and you get sick, the impact on our economy is real. And so I just want to encourage everybody to be as careful today as you were yesterday and the days before that, as we saw this decline in cases.
Right. It was interesting that you bring that up, George. When I said I got on this phone call that I lost track of time, the reason was because my sister was calling me because my 83-year-old aunt had sent out a request for a large family gathering for everyone to come to Michigan for this July. And so we were having family discussions among us, and only one family member out of the 100 people even responded and said, "Oh yeah, I'll be there." And it was her son, you know, and everyone else was just like lying low, not wanting to answer the email. But the discussion I had with my sister, whose daughter has had COVID twice now because she's in healthcare and has been, you know, working in exposed conditions, was that, you know, there's all kinds of reasons. There are, you know, and Tim could advise on this, but it was, you know, she talked about what her daughter said, which was, you know, it reduces by 90, you know, it's 95% efficacy to either not get it or to have a reduced case of it. And the answer is, if you have a reduced severity case of it, are you still shedding, and are you still getting people sick? And then we get to the whole hand washing and, you know, being careful thing, and you shake this person's hand and that person's hand, you start acting as a conduit. And then there's a peer group pressure that if we decide we don't have to wear masks and we can hang out again, and everybody sees you doing it, nobody knows because I've been vaccinated, nobody knows who's been vaccinated or not. So therefore, anybody that didn't believe it to begin with, you know, I recall that we had a difficult time getting everybody. And then once we got over a certain threshold, and I don't know what it was, and people looked around and saw everyone had a mask on almost, the rest of them just put masks on whether they liked or not, pretty much. And so as a peer group, if we take them off and we don't observe those kinds of things, like you're saying, keep acting like we haven't been vaccinated and we're in red, because it's a good, you know, it's still, until we get this thing totally under control, it's a good message to the whole community to stay the course until we're all safe.
I could not agree more.
Okay. Any other things that anybody wants to say? I know we've got some staff on here. Maybe you all have something to say. Sean, Randy.
I actually have a question. It's not specifically a legal question, though, for Tim, for Dr. Ryan. My question is the state more likely to be extremely stringent when it comes to allowing counties to go from yellow to blue, for the reasons George mentioned, and also just because of the fact that the amount of exposure would go up exponentially? seems easier to go from orange to yellow than yellow to blue, but I'm curious.
Peter, I wish I had a CDPHE crystal ball. I would think so. Given, as I said, 1 in 149 Coloradans is actively infected. It would have to get down to very low double digits for that, in my opinion, for that rationale to change, allowing things to open up further. But I don't know. I've been wrong most of the times when it comes to trying to explain the rationale behind things at CDPHE. So, I sympathize with them. They got more work than they could possibly imagine. And a lot of good people working there, but they also, as you might imagine, have to deal with counties, for lack of a better term, just don't care and will do what they want, and have reflected that to CDPHE. And CDPHE does not have an enforcement arm, despite what most people might think. So they're trying to precariously balance cult of personality on one hand and science and rationale on the other, and logic. And so that's is the best I can explain them. I would think so, but it's not reflected in Dial 2.0, meaning if your metrics meet these, you can go down in a week. I don't agree with that rationale at all. I don't think it makes sense. In some counties that have a total population of 500 and who don't have tens of thousands of people streaming through their county on a daily basis, that makes sense. But counties that have a much higher population and or they have tens of thousands of people streaming through the county on a daily basis, that doesn't make sense to me. And so they're, as you might imagine, they're trying to balance that county with 500 people in Denver Metro, just as a comparison, or Jefferson County. And so they're trying to balance that, and it's not a perfect model by any stretch. So we'll see. The proof will be in the pudding here in the next couple of weeks. Most counties are on the downward trend and continue to be that way. There's some exceptions. Most of them seem to be the west of us. And so we'll see. Time will tell.
My own anecdotal observation is that it appears if you're a good actor and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, it seems like what we ask the state to do or what our preferences that we express make a difference.
Okay. Randy. So I think that might conclude our meeting to discuss our move to yellow. I know that we have an executive session on the agenda as well. And so at this point, I move the Board of County Commissioners adjourn into executive session to discuss the following matters. Peter, you are muted.
I was just talking about that earlier. Pursuant to CRS 24-64024A and E, for the county attorney to meet with the Board of County Commissioners for the purposes of receiving direction related to purchase, acquisition, lease, transfer, or sale of any real, personal, or other property interests in county properties generally, and determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations or developing strategy for negotiations or instructing negotiators with regard to those properties.
Second.
Did I see, I'm reading on the agenda that discussion of personnel matters was also.
That was an error on the agenda, and I believe that Beth updated the agenda, so you may be seeing a previous one. She changed it simply to executive session.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. See you on the other side.
We will now.
Thank you. The board will adjourn into executive session as provided in the motion. No written minutes will be made of the session. Thank you, Randy. Thanks for your patience with us, Beth. I know you're trying to use this room. Okay, so the board has concluded its executive session. No written minutes were made of the session and no decisions were made. And that said, we are adjourned. We'll see you next Tuesday at 9 a.m.